Number 21, Texas is going to play number 8, Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl at the Texas State Fair. Big for Texas because last week they were throttled by UCLA at home. Mac Brown's worst home loss ever in Austin. Who do you think takes this one?
I think Oklahoma wins for one reason, because they have an identity on their offense. Landry Jones has not been the sharpest quarterback this season, but he's clearly looked better than Garrett Gilbert at Texas. And then you look at the skill players, Ryan Broyles and Kenny Stills, 2 quality wide receivers, and then DeMarco Murray at the tailback position. They've just got an identity on offense, whereas Texas has started 3 different running backs this season, have not found that go-to wide receiver. James Kirkendall, Malcolm Williams are both talented receivers, but they haven't found that guy that'll make the big play. I think Oklahoma wins this game. Texas plays better than they did against UCLA a week ago, but nonetheless, Oklahoma wins this game because they have the identity on offense.
Yeah, and also they got an identity too because they just win close games. Last year, everybody had to criticize Oklahoma, and rightly so, because they wouldn't win the close games. 4 of their losses were by a combined 12 points, but this year they're finding ways to win those games. Texas really struggled last week, and not even only last week, but when they were playing those inferior opponents early in the year like Wyoming and Rice, they were struggling in those games too, but in the end, it's just their sheer talent and their size would end up just wearing down their opponents. I think they can't get away with that this week. They couldn't get away with it versus UCLA. It's not going to happen this week. I like Oklahoma to win this one. 2 of our coaches that we mentioned on the hot seat were Mark Richt and Dan Hawkins, and they're going to square off in Boulder. Colorado's calling for a blackout. Do they beat Georgia?
I actually do think Colorado beats Georgia, and this is not because of talent. Georgia has more talent than this Colorado football team. Colorado does have a stout offensive line, returning all their guys from last year, and Georgia, a lot of question marks in their 3-4 defense. Only one returning starter from a year ago. They've clearly struggled, and they've been worn down in the 4th quarter. I like Colorado at home, Tyler Hansen, the quarterback, to get the job done. A close game. I just don't think Georgia goes across the country and stays mentally ready after that tough game and that tough loss in Starkville to Mississippi State last week.
Yeah, and I'm going to go Georgia. Absolutely no reason to pick them. I think they got better coaching and they got better talent, but yet that didn't get them the win last week on the road at Mississippi State, because I think Dan Mullen's a good coach, but give me a break. Mark Richt is better, and there's no doubt that Georgia has more talent, but they lost. Basically, I'm making the case for Colorado, but I just have a hunch that Georgia gets the win. Both these coaches would really use it, especially Mark Richt. Big Ten, again, Northwestern, who's unbeaten, 2 of their wins on the road, travels to Minneapolis to take on the Gophers, who were absolutely shredded on the ground last week by Northern Illinois. Does Northwestern get the win? They couldn't beat them last year at home. Do they get the win this year?
I think Northwestern does get the win. Dan Persa is now 4th in the country in pass efficiency rating. I think Dan Persa will throw the ball down the field to Drake Dunsmore, Jeremy Ebert, Sidney Stewart. These wide receivers, nobody's really heard of them. We're Big Ten junkies, so we've heard of them. But these guys just are possession receivers that make plays. And you've got a big body like Drake Dunsmore as a slot back making plays. He had a big game against Auburn last year in the Outback Bowl. I just think Minnesota, they don't stop the run, they don't stop the pass, and they struggled to run the ball the last 2 weeks against USC and Northern Illinois. If they have to depend on Adam Weber to make big plays throughout the duration of the game, they won't have a shot, because Northwestern, under the tutelage of Mike Hankwitz, the defensive coordinator, have been very impressive with the level of talent they have.
Exactly. Short passes all day by Dan Persa, tearing apart this Minnesota defense. That's what's going to happen. This Minnesota defense has struggled all year. South Dakota put up a lot of points on this defense. Northwestern is going to do the same thing. Northwestern also, you always like to talk about teams that are more disciplined. Northwestern is just a lot more disciplined than this Minnesota team. We heard reports that players were in tears after the game, things like that from Minnesota after they lost. But, if they really wanted to respond, they would have maybe beat USC after they lost to South Dakota. But you know what, though? They didn't respond to beat the loss to USC by beating Northern Illinois. That urgency, redemption stuff, I don't think applies here for Minnesota, because they've already had their chances to win games and they haven't yet.
Right, and this will be interesting because Northwestern does not run the ball effectively. Dan Persa is the leading rusher. He has less than 200 yards, but you've got to remember a couple years ago in the Metrodome, Mike Kafka had his breakout performance rush for 223 yards against the Gophers. So Persa, he will do it with his arm, but he might also break out with his legs in this game as well. Northwestern, I think, going away in the 4th quarter.
Now to the game that's near and dear to all of our hearts. Penn State travels to Iowa City to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Penn State has lost 7 of the last 8 contests to Iowa. The last 2 years, an unranked Iowa team dethroned a top 5 Penn State team. Both of those games very thrilling, but now the tables are turning a little bit, Mike, as Iowa comes into this game as the favorite, Penn State the underdog. Do you like Iowa in this one?
I like the Hawks all day. I know it's the Gator Chomp, but third down conversions is key for Penn State. They've got to keep their offense on the field. They have to possess the football because Iowa's offense is going to score some points against Penn State's defense, a defense that, you know, in years past and throughout the long career of Joe Paterno usually is very stout. But this year, this defense does not impress me all around. Their defensive line, they've got Jack Crawford, who's a good player, Ali Agbu. They've got 2 solid guys there. But I think our offensive line made a statement last week rebounding from that Arizona game. I like Iowa to win this game because we run the football and it opens up our strong passing game down the field. And Penn State is not going to be able to run the football against Iowa's defense. Iowa is number 1 in the country in defense, folks, ladies and gentlemen. Number 1 in defense. Penn State, freshman quarterback. Can they move the ball on our defense? I don't think so. I like Iowa to win this game 31-14. Penn State will find a way to get some points, but they're going to have a hard time because Iowa's offense is going to be on the field a lot.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed from Penn State this year is the fact that they do not get touchdowns when they are in the red zone. They settle for a lot of field goals, 15 times in the red zone this year, only 6 touchdowns. Last week versus Temple, they did not score a touchdown until the 4th quarter. They were up 15-13 in the 4th because they nailed 5 field goals. Now, it's impressive that they're nailing those field goals, but come on. You're facing a lot better Iowa defense this week. If you want to keep pace with our offense, because our offense is going to put up points, you're going to have to get touchdowns, not field goals. I don't think they do it. I also think their secondary is somewhat questionable, too. I think Ricky Stanzi and this passing offense has a great day. We're going to run the ball effectively, I think, too. Iowa, I'm usually cautious so a lot of times picking these games. Heck, I picked Iowa to beat Iowa State by 8 because I thought it was going to be a close game. But this week, I'm picking a big win for Iowa, 35-13. I like the Hawkeyes in this one. Penn State will have to settle for 2 field goals.
And Penn State did lose an offensive tackle for the season, so they're already going to be – their offensive line has not been impressive this season, and they lose a starter. That's going to hurt them even more. And Evan Royster, despite the big game against Temple, 187 yards, he only had 69 yards against Iowa last year. I don't see him having another resurgence against the Hawkeyes in Kinnick Stadium at night, homecoming.
You want to comment on our show? You want to tell us what you really think about Incompetent Sports Talk? UIOIST@gmail.com. That's your email address. We actually do read them. We get a lot of fan mail, and a lot of hate mail. But as Colin Coward says, hate mail is fan mail. So no matter what you think of the show, let us know. UIOIST@gmail.com. For Mike Rabon, I'm Alex Solsma. Good night and go Hawks. Good night and go Hawks.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was good.